Hello, my name is John Brewer. I'm the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer at Haystack ID. Welcome to the second quarter of 2024. In the next few weeks and next few months, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of generative AI tools to do document review in our space. And one of the questions I keep getting is, how the heck do you do document review with a generative AI tool? Well, I want to go over quickly the basics of how that works so that you know what the essentials are and what questions to be asking as you're looking at various products that you and your organization might be using or that your service providers might be using as we move into what promises to be a very interesting phase of document review in our history. So the general idea when we're doing document review with generative AI is we create a prompt that gives the generative AI a description of what it's doing, any information that it needs about doing that document review, give it the rubric for what criteria we want it to judge the document by, and then actually give it the extracted text of the document. So if you've done prompt construction exercises before, sometimes called prompt engineering, then you're going to be pretty familiar with how this works. Now, under the hood, essentially what's happening is we give the AI a prompt that's along the lines of, you are an expert attorney reviewing this document. And then we would give it something like, you need to determine if this document is responsive. The document is responsive if it contains a conversation about hiring. Now what we need to do is tell it how to return the data. Almost all document review platforms right now are, or for GenAI rather, are automated. So ideally we want it to return a document to us in a machine readable format that's going to be easy for us to process. So I'm going to say, please return your answer as a JSON document. That's just one of those little curly bracket documents with colons. You'll be able to read it once we get it back. That has two properties. It should have a boolean named relevant and a string named reason. So what this is saying is that we want it to give us back a properly formed document that says whether or not the document is relevant and what its reasoning for that is. And then right here we just put in the document that we were working with. And that's going to produce a generative AI result. Basically, all that it's going to be doing is it's going to be filling in this document from the beginning to the end. It's going to be predicting what an expert attorney would write as the rest of this document, which is fun to try to bend your mind around, but it appears to work, which is one of the many wild things about generative AI. So to test this process, I have the Enron dataset emails readily available. So I'm going to grab a Enron email that discusses employees just to test this and see how it does. Now this is a email that just contains some date of hire information, HR rep. We'll see whether or not this actually gets picked up by the generative AI and how it evaluates it. Now, one of the interesting things about generative AI is that we have a whole bunch of different models that we can use to work with. Now, this is just an internal tool that we have to run a prompt against a whole bunch of different models at the same time, and I'm going to do that here so that you get a sense of how much it matters what the underlying model of a generative AI solution is. So right now we got Meta's Llama 2, we've got Mixtral, which is kind of an open source model, and then we have 3 different flavors of GPT, which is OpenAI's product. So I'm just going to paste in that prompt with the document that I created earlier. So I'm going to paste in that prompt that we just created. And I'm going to tell this to run against all 5 models. Just tell me what all 5 of these guys think about this document. And then we'll see what the actual result that we get. And it takes a couple of seconds for a document to run through, which is something that we'll discuss a little later in the presentation in terms of how review works. But okay, so Llama 2 came back and said, yes, this document is relevant. It contains conversation about hiring, especially the hiring for these folks. Stroll said it is true. Actually, all of these guys said yes. Yes, this document is relevant, and they all say it is directly related to hiring. So let's go find a more marginal document, if we can. Okay, so here's another document. This one actually is not necessarily discussing hiring directly, but it is Brian Schaefer emailing Stephen Keen about his role within the organization, where he is in the org chart, what his responsibilities are with the Office of Labor and Employment Relations. Now, what do you think the generative AI models are going to make of this? Well, we don't have to wonder, we can find out. So I'm going to put it into this prompt, and then I am going to copy and paste that into our tool here. And you can see we have all of that loaded up. And we're going to kick that over to the generative AI and see what it has to say. Now again, we're running all 5 models against this. Now you may have your own interpretations of whether or not this document would be considered relevant during a document review. And it actually turns out that all 5 of our models here do consider it relevant for a variety of reasons, but this document would pass muster. So far we've had everything get approved. Is it possible for the GenAI to fail a document? Well, let's take a quick look at that. So here we have an email that is just about a story on clean air lawsuits. It shouldn't be connected to hiring in any meaningful way. Let's see how the AIs actually respond to it when we do the, and we're going to paste that in. Okay, and we're going to run this through the generative AI system. Now, all of these agree that the document is not about hiring, which is good. That's what we wanted. So far we're seeing that the system is actually pretty good at producing evaluations that are in line with a very simple rubric. So far, this technology looks really neat. Here's a question. Where are the complications with it? Where does this system start to fall apart? Well, one of the places that starts to fall apart is in documents that are very long. So let me show you that. So here I have a announcement document. It's kind of a newsletter thing, but it's reasonably long. It's about 11 kilobytes all told. It's got a couple of weird pieces here. It's kind of like got folded lines the way old emails used to have when they needed to fit in 80 columns for various systems. So what happens if we push this through our review system here? I'm going to copy that out. Now, again, the way that generative AIs work is they have a context window, which is essentially how many tokens back or how many words back they can remember. Some of the models that we're using have relatively limited context windows of only about 4,000 tokens. So let's see what happens when we overflow those. I'm going to go paste this document in there. I'm going to use all 5 of these. And we're going to submit the query, and we're going to see whether or not they're able to tell us anything about these documents. Okay. So what we find with the Llama elements, it just kind of gives us this, hello, Enron employees, I hope this email finds you well. It has completely forgotten what it's supposed to be doing. Mixtral looks like it also has, this message appears, it's just describing the email. Llama tried to continue the email. Mixtral tried to summarize the email. GPT 3.5 evaluated it and said, yes, it does contain information about hiring because it contains information about the Camp Enron Summer 2001 program, which is interesting. GPT-4 Turbo, which has 128K window. It definitely was able to read the entire thing. Says this document contains a section on Camp Enron 2001, which is about providing summer camp for employees and contractors. This implies an organizational hiring activity to summer camp. That might be a stretch for our documents discussing hiring, but okay, fair enough. That might indicate that we need to adjust our prompt. And then there is no discussion related to hiring in this document, says GPT-4. So this is actually the first disagreement that we've seen between different models. And obviously Llama 2 and Mixtral, who had context windows shorter than the documents we were working with, just kind of went off the rails here. So that's the first major restriction that you're going to see on document review, is that we can only do document review on smaller documents, and in theory you can break a document up and review it piece by piece, but in practice, if you have a complex rubric that relies on pieces in two different parts of the document, it can get you messed up. I have not seen anybody solve that problem in a way that I find deeply satisfying, but it's possible that somebody has. So the way that review using generative AI works is essentially we do this process of having the GenAI look at a document and tell us whether or not it is relevant for whatever reasons that it gives us. A lot of solutions out there will show you the reasoning block in the review platform so that you can see what the GenAI was thinking during that process. What are the real downsides here? Well, it takes a couple of seconds to review a document, which is obviously much faster than most humans can. It does cost about 1 to 6 cents per 1,000 tokens, or about per page, to do that review. So you can expect that to be marked up. In practice, you're probably looking at a 10-page document costing anywhere from a dime to 60 cents for the review process to happen. Now, one of the interesting questions right now is, do you run through every single document, pass every single document through this system? Because at 60 cents a document, if you do 1 million documents with this, that's going to be, what, $600,000? In practice, it's not going to be that. The pricing is a complicated issue here, as I'm sure you can imagine. And exactly how it's going to settle out isn't clear. Right now, it's looking like somewhere between 25 cents per document and 80 cents per document. When you've run all of these through, are you actually going to run it against every single document in the environment, or are you going to run it against a smaller set, like 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 documents, and then use a different existing process like TAR, Technology Assisted Review, to do that analysis? Because TAR is something that we've had for 13, 14 years now. It's pretty straightforward. It's not used everywhere. Not all jurisdictions accept it. But if you are able to only spend the 60 cents per document, or whatever the price ends up being for generative AI on 10,000 documents out of a sample to train up a TAR model, and then let it run through, will that produce an acceptable result for a similar cost, or for a considerably lower cost? That's a question that we don't have an answer for now, and I'm actually going to try to do another video about the various pieces that are going to be impacted by generative AI. I think that especially in April of 2024, there's going to be a lot of great programming on how generative AI review works. I know that there are a lot of vendors who are either at or getting very close to launching their products. And these are just the kind of questions that you need to be thinking about and kind of asking when you see them. What's the price point going to be per document? What's the largest document that you can handle? Do we need to run all of our documents through the solution, or can we do a smaller set for, using something like tar or other systems like that? These are the real questions that are going to need to be answered both by vendors and by each individual customer. And in a case-by-case, if you'll pardon the pun, situation, those answers may change. So, again, I think that generative AI is going to do remarkable things in terms of how it's going to impact review. It's still not clear exactly how far it's going to move the needle and whether or not it's going to be the way that we do small documents from now on, and that human review will become the purview of large documents, or whether we're going to find that some of the biases that show up in generative AI review are analogous to doing single partner review. Are we going to have a problem with that, where we have the generative AI model who is basically the super partner who can look at every single document by themselves and make a judgment? Is that consistency good, or do we actually want to have a set of different models rendering judgment on these documents to get a different point of view? And I think that that is also going to be something that's going to become a major question of practice over the next year or so, as we start seeing these models in production, probably first for internal investigations and that sort of thing, but I think that we're going to see these actually submitted before judges and magistrates in the not too distant future, and they are going to have to make decisions about what they think about this technology. Those are my thoughts on generative AI. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you are interested in seeing more videos along this format, where I just kind of dive directly into what these technologies look like under the hood, leave a comment, like, subscribe, all of that wonderful social media stuff. And I hope that you have a wonderful day.